It was a rainy evening in Kentucky, the diner nearly deserted as a young waitress named Clara, 28, moved about tidying up near the end of her long shift. Her weary eyes still held kindness despite the exhaustion of the day. Outside, the neon signs sputtered and glowed, throwing broken shadows across the scuffed linoleum floor. The door gave a slow creak as it opened, and an elderly man stepped in. His gray beard was damp, one leg wrapped in bandages, and his frail body was draped in a soaked, tattered military coat. In trembling hands, he clutched a faded soldier's cap. Raindrops streamed down his weathered face, dripping onto the floor and forming tiny puddles that seemed to reflect the sadness etched into his expression. Clara approached softly, her voice gentle, as she asked if she could help him. Her eyes caught the insignia stitched faintly on his coat, worn with time, but still unmistakable. The old man's voice barely rose above a whisper as he said, "Just a cup of hot water, please. And if there are any scraps of bread to spare, I'd be thankful for the rest of my life." His words cracked, the plea of a man unaccustomed to asking for charity. His back stayed straight despite the pain radiating from his injured leg, his scarred and calloused hands revealing unspoken stories of sacrifice and hardship. Clara slipped quietly into the kitchen and returned with a full plate of steaming food, something another customer had sent back untouched. She placed it in front of him with a small smile, adding a cup of coffee and extra butter for the bread. Leaning closer, she whispered, "The coffee's on the house," making sure no one else overheard. The veteran's eyes filled with tears as he murmured, "Thank you, young lady. You remind me of my wife when she was young. She always helped strangers, always said everyone deserves warmth, especially those who've known too much cold." He twisted a worn wedding band gently between his fingers as the memory crossed his face. Just then, the diner owner appeared, his face twisting at the sight before him. His voice boomed across the room, harsh and unforgiving. "I've told you already, this place isn't a charity." The words echoed off the walls, drawing unwanted glances from the few lingering patrons. The old veteran startled, his cap slipping from his hands as he tried to rise despite the pain in his leg. Clara quickly stepped between them, her tone calm yet firm as she said she would cover the cost herself, reaching for her wallet with determination in her eyes. The owner's fist crashed against the counter, the sharp sound cutting through the silence of the diner. "You're finished. Gather your things and leave, right now," he roared, spittle flying as he jabbed a finger toward the door. Around the room, customers bent over their plates, pretending not to hear, their silence heavier than the storm outside. One woman whispered to her companion, just loud enough for Claire to catch, "That's what happens when you let trouble in." She got what she deserved. Not a single person spoke up. Not one lifted a hand in protest. The quiet compliance of those who knew better felt colder than the rain pounding the windows. Clara walked out into the storm, her hair plastered to her forehead, clutching her bag tightly. Though she had lost her job, she carried herself with dignity, refusing to look back. The neon light's reflection rippled in the puddles beneath her steps as she left the place behind. Hobbling after her, the old soldier pressed something into her hand before fading into the night. It was a worn dog tag, the name etched faintly across the metal. "You just saved a broken soul, child," he whispered before vanishing into the rain. The tag felt strangely warm against her skin despite the chill of the storm. Back inside her small apartment, Clara dried off the stray cat she'd been caring for. A one-eyed tabby that had shown up at her window 3 months earlier. She pulled out her cracked phone, checking her balance. $42 left, with rent due in 10 days. Her hands trembled faintly, but she lifted her chin, just as the veteran had done. By morning, shaky footage of her firing had spread across local social media, recorded by a teenager's phone. The video showed her standing her ground as the owner shouted, yet instead of sympathy, many comments sided with him. "Rules are rules. A business isn't a charity," one user posted. "She should have asked permission first," wrote another. A cruel remark suggested she'd probably been stealing food all along. Former coworkers blocked her online, while a so-called friend sent a private message. "Always trying to play the hero, aren't you? How's that working out now? Some of us need jobs more than applause." Clara applied to 3 other diners but was turned away at each. "We can't risk the attention," one manager admitted, almost apologetic. Another didn't even let her fill out the form, simply sliding it back with a thin smile. At a downtown coffee shop, when she shyly asked if they needed help clearing tables, the owner recognized her face, then shook his head without a word. The door closed in her face before she could explain. That evening, she wandered the streets, her fingers clutching the dog tag in her pocket, tracing the name etched into the metal. Rutherford, Michael J. She wondered what his story was, where he had served, what he had endured, how someone who had given so much ended up with so little. Then she spotted him, curled in a bus shelter, a torn sheet of plastic pulled over him, his bandaged legs stretched out uncomfortably, his face troubled even in restless sleep. Clara crept close, setting down a small bundle wrapped in newspaper. Half a sandwich she could hardly afford to part with but couldn't bear to keep. As she turned to leave, a black military vehicle slowed nearby. The uniformed driver watched her intently, speaking urgently into a phone. Clara hurried away, heart pounding, wondering if even this act of kindness would somehow bring her more punishment. The next morning, the small town stirred with astonishment. 200 soldiers in full dress uniform stood in precise formation outside the diner, their posture rigid, faces solemn, and not a single word spoken. Onlookers slowed, phones raised to capture the remarkable scene. Leading them was Colonel James Rutherford, a decorated officer with 3 combat tours behind him, his expression carrying the same firm resolve Clara had noticed in the older man. With steady steps, he entered the diner, asking for the manager. The owner stumbled out from the kitchen, face pale, words tripping over themselves. I didn't know who he was," he muttered, his hands twisting nervously in his apron as his eyes darted toward the imposing line of uniforms outside. The colonel's voice remained calm but cut with authority. "You didn't need to know who he was. But the man you humiliated saved my life in Iraq in 2007, along with 12 others, after our transport was hit. He carried me 3 miles despite shrapnel in his leg." By now, reporters had arrived, broadcasting the moment live across the state. Phones caught every reaction, every word, as the #veteran dishonored began to spread. The colonel continued, pulling a framed citation from under his arm. "Michael Rutherford earned the Silver Star for valor. After my mother passed, he battled PTSD. He refused our help, saying others needed it more. We've been searching for him for 8 months." The owner's face drained of color, the weight of his actions sinking in as murmurs of disgust spread among the growing crowd. Many had crafted signs on the spot reading, "Respect our veterans and no service here." Clara was soon contacted and asked to return. When she stepped inside, all 200 service members saluted her in unison. The sound of 200 hands snapping to brows echoed down the street, bringing tears to the eyes of bystanders. Colonel Rutherford bowed his head slightly. "You gave my father another night of life, and you remind us who we truly serve." From his pocket, he drew a Medal of Honor, not Clara's, but his father's, pawned months earlier to feed a struggling family with children. "He always said medals don't feed the hungry," the colonel explained, his voice breaking. "But they should remind us why they matter." He placed it in Clara's hand, closing her fingers gently around it. The diner owner faced swift consequences. Customers organized a boycott, employees quit in protest, and suppliers hesitated to deliver. Within hours, the business he had built over 15 years crumbled. Meanwhile, Clara stayed quiet through it all, answering no reporters, giving no speeches. She simply held on to the dog tag, her silence carrying more weight than any words. A week later, a small boy walked into the new community kitchen where Clara now worked as manager, a role offered by a veterans business network after seeing the viral story. He placed a $1 bill and a homemade cookie on the counter. "I saw you in the video," he said earnestly. "Can you use this to help someone else? My grandpa was a soldier too." Clara smiled through tears, placing her hand over her heart in a gesture that spoke volumes without a word. That simple gift from a child meant more than all the publicity that had followed. Outside, a flag waved proudly, donated by veterans who now volunteered at her side. Across town, the old diner stood abandoned, a for-lease sign swaying in the window, a quiet reminder of consequences. Michael Rutherford, now receiving proper care and housing, often sat at a corner table, sharing memories with younger soldiers eager to hear lessons not only of combat, but of the dignity found in everyday courage. His son visited daily, mending years lost to silence. Some carry honor quietly, never seeking recognition. But when they are dishonored, the truth of a community is revealed. This story may fade in days, but if it is not retold, history will remain silent forever. Subscribe to Real Legend Stories where memory, justice, and compassion are guarded to the very end. I told you, we don't serve beggars here.